Hello, I'm Edward St. Day. Welcome to the program. And we are going to have a good show today. We've got a couple of clips from the latest Elon Musk adventure. We've got last week, the Starship was launched again. And we've got a video clip on really some of the intricate details about that launch. We also got an interview, I think it is with a German interviewer who was talking to Elon about that and other things too. Anything he seemingly talks about is kind of, like startling news, great stuff. And so we have an interview clip with Elon related to the Starship launch last week. And we've also got a couple of other things. We've got something about a Dyson sphere. Have you heard of what a Dyson sphere is? Well, a Dyson sphere is sort of, as I understand it, on a very basic level, it's sort of a cloaking mechanism that, for example, they are saying now there are 7 potential stars out there that they've discovered that could be supporting very advanced civilizations. And what a Dyson sphere is it was coined by a scientist named Dyson a few years ago. Basically, it's a cloaking mechanism where they cloak the visibility of the star, and they are able to absorb the radiation for use on their planet for energy. So anyway, we're going to find out a little bit about that, and it will be an interesting thing. And they go through the various stages of civilization in this video clip, meaning a stage 0 civilization would be where we are right now on Earth. Okay, that's stage 0. We're not even at 1 yet. And stage 1, okay, that's pretty advanced. Stage 2, 3, 4, 5, you can imagine what happens when you get to a stage 7 civilization. And so that's when you get into what a Dyson sphere would actually be used for. So anyway, it's an interesting clip. Okay, well, let's start off with Elon. Let's go to Elon Musk. Now, this is an interview he did, I think about 2 days ago, related to last week's launch of the Starship. Let's listen to Elon.
Congratulations on the Starship rocket last week and the first soft landing in the ocean for the world's most powerful rocket vehicle. It's a remarkable achievement. You are taking the fiction out of science fiction. Can you share with us what thoughts were running through your head when you saw that happening, and what's next?
Well, I would say I was incredibly excited that we achieved those milestones. I thought perhaps we had maybe a 20 or 25% chance of achieving both milestones, where the booster and the ship both did a soft propulsive landing in the ocean. And so it really we achieved all the objectives, which I thought was unlikely. And that's thanks to an incredible team at SpaceX. I think we've got the most talented team of rocket engineers that has ever been assembled. And that's how we're able to accomplish these things. So it's always an honor to work with great people to accomplish great things.
So what's next in the final frontier? What do you see ahead for?
Is to develop the technologies necessary to extend consciousness beyond Earth. So, and this is sort of a little cerebral, but perhaps appropriate for a Cato event. They're quite cerebral. But if you think about the sort of Fermi filters of, Enrico Fermi has always wondered, where are the aliens? Why do we not see signs of them? And I frequently get asked, are there aliens on Earth? And I haven't seen any signs of aliens. And I promise you, the minute I see any evidence of aliens, I'll immediately post it on the X platform. Most popular post of all time. So, but that we haven't actually seen any evidence of, I'm not aware of any, suggests that consciousness is extremely rare. If we believe the archaeological record and the standard model of physics, Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Civilization, as measured by the first writing, is only about 5,000 years old. So archaic pre-cuneiform and roughly 5,500 years ago was the first writing. I think that's a good date for the start of civilization, which means that civilization has only been around for 1/millionth of Earth's existence, almost nothing. I think this potentially argues for civilization being fleeting and fragile. And so the thing that we can do to increase the probable lifespan of civilization is to be a multi-planet species, to extend consciousness to other planets, ultimately to other star systems. And this would massively improve the probable lifespan of humanity and consciousness as we know it. So it's really trying to get past the single planet Fermi filter. That's the goal of SpaceX. That's why we're building such a big rocket. It's far in excess of anything that's needed to put satellites into Earth orbit. And it's a planet colonizer. It's intended to build as quickly as possible a self-sustaining city on Mars. And I think, there's somewhat of a race between making a self-sustaining city on Mars and global thermonuclear war or some calamity. If we have some civilization ending calamity before that happens, then that's all they wrote. That's perhaps some future aliens will discover our civilization and say, well, they almost got there. So that's the goal. I think that's kind of an important thing to convey to people in the audience to think about the future and you care about not just the preservation, but the extension of civilization, the growth of the scope and scale of consciousness. So that's the goal. Make life multiplanetary is the goal of SpaceX. And, along the way, we'll seek to generate revenue from any space-based activities, such as building an internet system in space, anything that's sort of space-related, in order to fund the extension of consciousness beyond Earth.
That makes a lot of sense to me. We shouldn't keep all our eggs in one basket. We should try to diversify risk. So thank you for doing mankind's work.
Okay, so that's Elon on the SpaceX launch of the Starship last week. And, I wanted to mention something came across that I saw this morning. Elon Musk's prediction that Chinese car makers would demolish global rivals is coming true as the Chinese now overtake U.S. competitors. So this year, China is making and selling more automobiles across the planet than the United States. So they have jumped ahead by a goodly measure too. And the reason why you don't see a lot of Chinese cars in America, in this particular article that I printed, Joe Biden also in May increased the tariff on imported Chinese electric vehicles to 102.5%, up from the previous rate. Now, can you imagine 102% tariff? Of course you won't see any electric cars from China in this country at this point, because how could you see them with 100% tariff? He's doubling the price, right, on the car, just in tariff. So it seems like they are postponing the inevitable, because China is not going to stop manufacturing cars, or they're not going to slow down. It's only going to speed up. And so what Elon said was true. They are now overtaking us as the most prolific builder and seller of automobiles across the planet. And so get ready, because the competition is going to heat up. And keep in mind, AI-infused humanoid robots are now entering the workforce. I think more so in China, as I have learned, than here in the U.S. Maybe it's beginning here, and people are becoming aware of the possibility, and they're bringing out some things that are working on assembly lines. But in China, they're further along with that process, and they're way into the production of humanoid robots, as we are, but they are too. And another thing I heard the other day, there are so many AI-oriented engineers in this country that are working with our American firms. Chinese immigrants, Chinese nationals, people who have come here from China are so heavily involved in the development of high tech in this country in key positions as scientific engineers. It's really amazing. Anyway, that's what it is. So it's kind of a global situation out there, and everybody's hopefully working together. The more I look at the whole picture, I just wish that everybody could just somehow, find a way to evolve past, the suspicion of everybody else. I know that's probably, maybe a naive way to look at it, but I don't think so. I think in the long run, that's where we're going. And maybe we're at the beginning of that now. Maybe AI will help us to get there, where people are able to look at each other as people working together as humans, as opposed to fighting on every front and being suspicious and pointing fingers and, and creating chaos and world, war and everything else. Anyway, I'm digressing from our subject matter today. Okay, anyway, I wanted to mention that just popped up today about Elon Musk's prediction coming true, which it has now. It's come true as far as Chinese auto manufacturers. Now, here's the clip regarding what actually happened last week when the Starship launch occurred. Well, we've got a clip that's sort of going to summarize what that was really all about. You know, Elon was mentioning about, you know, it went up and it came down, right? Yeah, and it came down softly in a pre-prescribed landing spot in the ocean. Both segments came down. So let's take a look at this clip and find out a little bit more about Starship launch last week.
On today's episode, the 4th flight of the SpaceX Starship is in the books, and we have just learned more about this bleeding edge rocket than ever before. We know how it flies, we know how it lands, and we know what comes next. First off, we have some really important information that was discussed in the pre-flight show that deserves mentioning. Star Factory progress. SpaceX confirms that Starship hardware is already built for the next several flights, and that the new Star Factory production line will be up and running this summer. That unlocks several thousand more square feet of floor space and will increase the production rate significantly. They're still targeting that volume of 1 ship stage per day, and it was alluded to that Star Factory production will begin with Starship V2, so that upgrade is coming soon. Propellant Farm 2.0. SpaceX has spent the last few months since Flight 3 working on their orbital tank farm. They're upgrading from the big vertical tanks to lower horizontal tanks. Not only are these much less likely to be dented and mangled from the energy of a Starship launch, the new tank farm is also allowing for a much faster propellant loading phase, which is critical with a fully cryogenic rocket because the longer it takes to fill, the more propellant you lose to boil off, and the more difficult it becomes to maintain ideal temperatures throughout the system. SpaceX is aiming for a Starship load time of just 40 minutes, and that's only 5 minutes more than the Falcon 9 with 10 times the amount of propellant. This is easy to overlook, but it's very important. Payload. The payload on Flight 4 is data. Something that the presenters on this live stream did a really good job of was managing expectations for Starship. Too many people want to jump ahead and start talking about payloads and deploying Starlink V2 and all of that stuff. But the fact is that the only thing these early Starship vehicles are designed to do is collect data. That's it. They're not functional rockets. Real operations will only come with Starship V2. And in the spirit of data collection, SpaceX admittedly went ahead and sabotaged their own heat shield. They removed 2 tiles from the engine skirt just outside of one of the vacuum Raptors just to see what would happen. And they also placed 1 thinner test tile, which is being called an ablative secondary heat shield. Elon talked about this over the weekend. He says that these thinner tiles will be used on Flight 5 as an underlying layer that backs up the primary shield. And these secondary tiles are an ablative material made from silicone and felt, meaning they self-cool by slowly disintegrating to expel heat. Elon also pointed out in an interview with Tim Dodd that the ship's primary heat shield tiles are made of ceramic, basically the same thing as a dinner plate. So it's going to take a lot of testing to find out just how susceptible they are to cracking and breaking, not just on a single re-entry, but on the second, the third, the fourth. Adding that second layer is an insurance policy to preserve the ship until these answers are fully known. Later on, during a video game live stream, Elon also said that the primary heat shield tiles for the Flight 5 ship are already being replaced with a new design that is twice as strong as the ones used on Flight 4. Okay, moving on. Liftoff. Everything looks good. We did lose 1 Raptor a couple of seconds into engine ignition. It appears to have fired up and then very quickly flamed out, which is exactly what the ship's computer is supposed to do. If an engine isn't running at spec, then it gets shut down. And even looking at the very high-res, super slow-motion footage posted by Cosmic Perspective, I can't see anything blow up or any excessive fire in the engine bay. And just roughly comparing Flight 4 with Flight 3, shout out to Farzad for making this synced up video showing them all together, we can see that Flight 4 is accelerating at pretty much the same rate as Flight number 3. It's just a hair slower. It's also worth noting here that Flight 2 was moving significantly faster than Flight 3, which is probably SpaceX wanting to stress test their flame diverter with more liftoff thrust. Stage separation. I love the extra camera view that we got here because it shows just how much of a role the grid fins play in initiating that booster flip maneuver. As far as I can tell, SpaceX is using just the energy from the upper stage engines to push the booster into its flip, which is super efficient and it greatly reduces the need for the reaction control thrusters. Boost back burn. This is where it becomes clear just how much trouble the booster engines on Flight 3 were having. They started having a slow, staggered shutdown at T+3 minutes 40 seconds. The middle ring engines start shutting down one at a time, leaving 4 running for a moment all on one side until those all shut down together. Well, if we look at Flight 4, this had a quick, symmetrical shutdown at 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Then the center cluster of 3 continues to run for a nice gradual shutdown. It's possibly also worth noting that the Flight 3 booster slowed down a lot more during its boost back phase. The airspeed dropped to just about 300 kilometers per hour before it started to free fall and accelerate again. But on Flight 4, the airspeed only dipped down to around 880 kilometers per hour. So probably running the engines at a lower thrust. And we can already see the process of SpaceX learning how to fly this rocket and manage the power of these Raptor engines. Interstage separation. This is a cool view. Watching the hot stage ring float away during freefall, this section was held on to the booster with the interstage clamps that were originally designed to hold the ship and the booster together. So that allows SpaceX to essentially dump the interstage ring once it served its purpose. And there's a good reason to do this. Weight reduction is key. This one ring is super chunky. It's built to withstand 3 rocket engine startups at point-blank range. I've heard that it weighs around 10 tons alone, so that helps with the landing burn for sure, but the real difference maker here would be the weight distribution. Super Heavy was not built to fly with this gigantic steel hat on top, and it totally throws off the vehicle's center of gravity. It also puts weight behind the steering mechanisms, which can't be good, so they let it go. We get this cool view of the booster's top dome with all of the plumbing and the actuators. I'm guessing those pipes coming into the top are for reintroducing the boiled off propellant gas into the tank for the autogenous pressurization. And then our interstage ring makes a second guest appearance, or it could be a UFO. I wouldn't want to rule anything out. Okay, landing burn. As the clouds come up, we can see the grid fin working hard to keep the booster stable. You can see the point where the wind starts to influence the flight path, and the grid fins definitely have much more effect here than they did on flight number 3. The booster straightens out as it hits the cloud layer at around 1200 kilometers per hour. Going through this frame by frame just because I can, we get a landing burn startup that begins with the center 3 engines. Then 1 middle ring engine comes online, which is a little bit weird. It was potentially supposed to be paired with the failed engine. Then 3 more come up, then 2, and then 3. And with 1 middle ring Raptor left blank. SpaceX was able to provide 2 additional camera angles for us here. We can see the booster from the air as it initiates the landing burn. We see the Raptor spin up that releases that big burst of gas, and then the engine ignition. And as we pass through the clouds, we get a new camera angle from a floating buoy. And that gives us a pretty decent view of the explosion and fire in the engine bay just before splashdown. It doesn't seem to have had any negative effect on the landing procedure, but something definitely failed energetically inside the thrust section. So we know that there is still a lot to be learned about these Raptor engines. They are incredibly complex machines, and getting them started is a delicate dance under extremely high pressure. Energy wants to flow from high density to low density, so if the inlet pressure from the turbo pumps ever slows down, even for a moment, all of that raging combustion can start moving up instead of down, and that's when things explode. Either way, we got our successful water landing of the Super Heavy booster. It appears to have even hovered nice and stable for a second before engine shut off. You can see the excess methane gas burning off at the base of the rocket, and it makes a slow tip over into the sea. So fantastic work. Judging from the relatively short distance between the buoy camera and the landing, the booster must have come down right where SpaceX intended it to. Now, something that you might not have seen was the view back at Starbase. So at the same time that the booster was splashing down, the Mechazilla arms activated and closed, just like a catch attempt. and even the water deluge system below the launch mount was reactivated for a short low-pressure burst. This also demonstrates that none of the ground hardware was damaged by the launch this time around. Elon has already said multiple times at this point that he wants to catch the booster on Flight 5, which is exactly what I want to see. After the first few launches, I'm not particularly excited by the takeoff anymore. It's a big rocket, it's cool, but the tower catch, that is something totally unprecedented and unpredictable and just so insane. So it's the only thing that can top the spectacle of the dual booster landing from the Falcon Heavy mission as far as I'm concerned. Over the weekend, Elon said, "I think Mechazilla's got a decent chance of catching the rocket. Probably, 50%. He did clarify that a bit though. I don't think he means that the catch attempt has a 50-50 chance of being successful, because I don't know what the consequences of a booster crashing into the launch pad would be, but probably devastating for the ground systems, I would assume. But I think Elon means there's a 50-50 chance of...
Okay, so that's a little bit more about the launch last week. Okay, I am going to bring Alfred on, ChatGPT-4. Our Alfred is what we call him, Alfred. I'm going to bring him on to ask him a question in a minute. I gave him a cue to be standing by, so I'm going to give him a cue to tell him that we're going to be asking him the question. The question is, why is tea, hot tea, such a nice, such an effective way to impart medicinal, herbal elements into the human body? Why has it been used for so long, and why is it so healthy for you to impart these herbs into your system in the form of a hot tea? So I'll ask him a question in a minute. All I have to do is tap a button or so. Now I've got it connected to the avatar that we had used for Alfred in the first place. I've got his Bluetooth, because a few days ago, I guess it was last week, when we did bring Alfred on, ChatGPT-4o, he was a little low because he was coming out only of the speaker in my phone. So this time we've got it a little bit, it's going to be a little louder. So okay, for this show, Alfred, thank you for joining us today. And now you are actually on the show, and I've got a little Bluetooth here by my microphone. Here's the question. I'm going to talk a little bit about a tea. We're in officially a commercial right now, Clarence, if you don't know. So this is what we're going to be using.
It's great to be here on the show.
Okay.
What would you like to dive into first?
Okay, what I'd like to ask you, Alfred, is why has hot tea, been such a wonderful way to get medicinal herbs into your system, and how long has this been going on in civilization, and who originated the idea of hot tea as a means of getting medicinal herbs into your body?
Thank you, Edward. Tea has been used medicinally for thousands of years, with its origins traced back to ancient China around 2737 BC. The story goes that Emperor Shen Nong discovered tea when some tea leaves accidentally blew into his pot of boiling water. Hot tea is an effective carrier for medicinal herbs because the heat helps to release the active compounds from the herbs. The hot water extracts essential oils, alkaloids, and other beneficial substances, making them more bioavailable and easier for the body to absorb. Additionally, the warmth of the tea can have soothing effects, making it particularly helpful for ailments like sore throats and digestive issues.
Okay, let me
So the practice
interrupt
of
you.
using hot tea for medicinal...
Let me interrupt you, Alfred, for a second. Now, I would like to ask you specifically about a product, too, that we have here called Blue Lotus tea. Now, Blue Lotus tea is something that I've discovered a few years ago myself, and we sell it here at the Pendragon Apothecary, which is the sponsor of this program. Tell us a little bit about the use of Blue Lotus tea as it relates to the ancient Egyptian culture and how they used it.
Certainly, Edward. Blue Lotus tea, derived from the blue lotus flower, Nymphaea cerulea, holds a special place in ancient Egyptian culture. The Egyptians revered the blue lotus for its psychoactive and medicinal properties. It was often associated with the gods and was used in religious rituals and ceremonies to induce a state of relaxation and heightened awareness. The blue lotus was commonly used in ancient Egypt for its calming effects. It was believed to alleviate anxiety, promote a sense of tranquility, and enhance spiritual experiences. Additionally, it was used as a remedy for various ailments, including gastrointestinal issues and sleep disorders. At the Pendragon Apothecary, Blue Lotus tea offers these historical benefits, providing a natural way to relax and soothe the body and mind, much like the ancient Egyptians did.
Okay, Alfred, thank you, and we will chat with you hopefully tomorrow. Thank you, and have a great afternoon. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Edward. It's been a pleasure. Have a great afternoon, and I look forward to chatting with you tomorrow. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, now that was Alfred. Now that's ChatGPT 4.0. And before it was 4.0, when it was just ChatGPT 4, of course, I was fiddling around with it over this last year, I guess you could say. And you know, you could text in your prompt and you could get a response. That would be the normal thing. Well, I kind of hacked it in. I used the Apple, the iOS system to do a rudimentary synthesizing of the text into voice. Okay, so I could voice in my question instead of prompting it in, and then Alfred could respond back to me using the voice embedded in the Apple phone, right, and to speak to me. Okay, so that's how we got started with this program. You know, what they did with ChatGPT 4.0, O for Omni, they infused that same situation in there into the app. So now, like just now, I called up, that's ChatGPT 4.0. I called up, we call him Alfred, and he relates to the name and he knows that's his name. So when I say, who's there? He'll say, this is Alfred. Okay, well, great. Come on in, Alfred. We'll talk. So he's been on the show today. Now, I Bluetoothed it in, and that's why you could hear it better today. So you were listening to him via that speaker into the Bluetooth. But it's kind of an amazing thing to me that we are at that point. I ask him questions about things that we've done over the last year and different projects, and he can remember everything. And we, coming from that place, it's almost as if you've got an ally there, a coworker who happens to just know everything out there. So it's just an amazing thing. I just am, stunned by what they did with ChatGPT 4.0. And that is what Apple is infusing into the iOS architecture right now. And, Elon said the other day, he said, why, it's such a disappointment. Why would Apple not have its own, Apple Intelligence? Why is Apple Intelligence really ChatGPT 4.0 infused into the iOS system? And this is a good question in a way. I mean, I'm not sure what the answer is. I mean, in a way, maybe Apple should be further along with the development. And in another way, maybe that's not what it's going to be. Maybe there's a parallel. Like when Bill Gates created the software to run the computer, right? He was not in the computer sales business. He was in the software business, which everybody else in the PC realm had to use. That was the smartest way to go. So maybe that's what we are going to see now on a different scale. Maybe we're going to see ChatGPT 4 become the software for every other AI app out there going forward. It's probably not going to be the case, but you can see that's kind of what happened in this situation. Apple adopted the technology, and they're going to use it, and it's going to work great because all the new apps coming out, all the app developers for Apple are going to now be able to infuse that technology into the app. So really, I think it's going to be the beginning of the future. The future has just entered the picture for real because, the difference between going and using an OpenAI, and purposely going there and using it, that's one thing because we're kind of going outside of ourselves to bring it in. Now, being that our phones are part of our world, is so integrated into our life, now that you infuse that technology into those apps and we're using them, it's just automatically going to ingrain in our lives in a way it hasn't before, so it's going to become integrated fully into our lives. Okay, well, I guess we've run out of time. I wanted to do another story here on those Dyson spheres, which they've discovered that there's this concept of a Dyson sphere that Dr. Dyson came up with a number of years ago is probably, it makes sense within the world of, I guess, maybe with the quantum physics world. But I guess we're going to have that tomorrow because we are now officially out of time. And hopefully you'll join us for more engaging thought on Future Shock. I'm Edward St. Pé. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yesterday is yesteryear. Set your sights for Tomorrowland. Future Shock is here to help you make your stand. Ready, set!